welcome to The Point World Affairs. I'm Cha-Sang-mi. Natural disasters ranging from typhoons, earthquakes to heat waves have devastated many parts of the world this year, resulting in many deaths and causing billions of dollars worth of economic damage. In fact, over the course of the last 20 years, climate-related disasters alone have caused $2.4 trillion in economic losses. Today, we discuss various countermeasures to tackle this issue of climate change. For that, we have with us Pyeongchang, the Ambassador of Climate Change from the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Thank you for joining us today.
It is my pleasure.
Ambassador, so we have been talking about this climate change for some time now. It's been a serious issue. There has been heated debates about this. But it seems like the international community is not doing enough to tackle this issue. What's your thought on that?
The international community has tried to address climate change and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. But as you mentioned, this summer we have suffered heat waves and the droughts and floods, etc. This happened not only in Korea, but also in the other parts of the world. So this means that we have to do more, even though we have done a lot, including reaching the historic Paris Agreement. I believe that this is the same message from the IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees Celsius, which was adopted in Songdo, Incheon. The IPCC means Intergovernmental Panel on the Climate Change, and it is the international body, independent body of climate scientists. And their message is quite clear. We have to do more to limit the global average temperature to below the 1.5 degrees. And on the other hand, the current natural disaster indicates that adaptation to climate change has become more and more important. So far, we have focused on the mitigation, the activities. The mitigation means to reduce the greenhouse gases emissions. But now, we feel that mitigation and adaptation are equally important. So we have to do more on the adaptation area.
So far, it's been 3 years since the agreement was signed, but do you think that right now, currently, this agreement is on the right track, or do you think it's a little bit below the expectations?
Actually, we reached the Paris Agreement in 2015, and the 2015, all the parties has decided to complete the rule book of the Paris Agreement. Now the negotiations to complete the rule book is underway. So I can't say the Paris Agreement is very well being implemented, but I can say that I am neither optimistic nor pessimistic about the future implementation of the Paris Agreement, but we have to be determined to implement the Paris Agreement in the future. So we are now making utmost efforts for that.
Right, one of those efforts was held in Pyeongchang. So let's take a look what happened there at the forum.
Yes.
The Korea Carbon Forum was held in Pyeongchang, Gangwon Province for 2 days in October. The meeting was aimed at discussing ways to tackle climate change, which is growing more serious by the day, and to implement the goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the Paris Agreement.
4차 산업혁명 시대에 걸맞는 기후변화 대응 기술 개발, 그리고 이를 실천하기 위한 정책 동향, 기술 동향, 산업 동향에 대한 여러 가지 정보를 공유하는 등 다양한 프로그램도 준비됐습니다. 아울러서 온실가스 감축에 일반 국민이 참여하는 마음과 파리 협정 이행을 더욱 구체화하는 방안이 이번 포럼에서 실질적으로 논의되기를 기대합니다.
After the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015, the international community has entered into a new climate system following the Kyoto Protocol. Korea, the 9th largest emitter of greenhouse gases, voluntarily submitted to the UN its 2030 target of reducing emissions by 37% from business-as-usual levels. To that end, the government has introduced the Emissions Trading Scheme in 2015, which is a measure to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. At the forum, in-depth discussions were held on the trends and prospects of the global carbon market.
탄소 시장이라고 하는 기존에 들어보시지 못했던 어떠한 새로운 시장, 이런 온실가스를 배출할 수 있는 권리를 사고 파는 시장이 1조 7천억 정도의 시장이 형성이 되어 있습니다. 탄소 배출권이라고 하는 분야를 연계해서 온실가스를 효율적으로 감축하는 게 중요하고요. 다시 말씀드리면 온실가스도 감축하고 돈도 벌고 이러한 것들의 새로운 어떠한 그 정책 이런 부분을 좀 우리가 이해하고 적극적으로 활용할 필요성이 있을 것 같습니다.
In addition to experts and entrepreneurs, the forum encouraged children, housewives, and college students to take part as well, as the entire nation needs active participation to reduce greenhouse gases.
기후변화 대응에 대한 새로운 인식을 갖게 하고 그 대응책에 대해서 폭넓은 논의를 하는 장을 만들어준 데 대해서 대단히 의의가 깊다고 생각을 합니다.
There were other notable participants at the forum who came from countries like Vietnam, Ethiopia, and Sri Lanka. Ethiopia, which has frequent droughts and floods due to climate change and arid land quality, has adopted the low-carbon development model in 2011 and is learning from Korea's experience and technology.
South Korea has demonstrated the possibility of changing degraded landscape to productive landscape. Ethiopia can learn more from this experience. This demonstrated experience showed us there is a possibility of changing degraded landscapes to productive landscape like South Korea. So Ethiopia can follow what South Korea has done.
With the international community paying keen attention to the role of countries, cities, and local governments under the Paris Agreement, Korea's responsibility to spread low-carbon technology to developing countries is also growing. On behalf of Korea, Gangwon Province has established itself as the standard for a low-carbon city in implementing the Paris Agreement. The successful hosting of the Carbon Forum in Korea has brought the whole world to a strong start in implementing a low-carbon society.
Ambassador, you yourself went to the forum and participated in the forum, but I hear that South Korea is a role model for some of the developing countries in terms of dealing with climate change. Is that so?
Yes, as you are well aware, Korea is the only country who transformed itself from the recipient country to the donor country in such a short period. So most countries expect Korea to be a model for addressing climate change and for the development. We have achieved the economic development in a very short time. So most countries expect Korea to be a model for achieving the climate change. And now the global trend is to take more active action on the climate change. So we have to take the leading role in combating the climate change. In that sense, 2018, the Pyeongchang Carbon Forum, it was quite successful and significant in the sense that the Carbon Forum provided the insight on how to tackle climate change, as well as the local government has shown the leadership in addressing climate change. The Pyeongchang Carbon Forum reminds me of the saying that think globally, act locally. So this is symbolic, the forum that the local government has shown the leadership. And to address climate change, multi-stakeholders' participation is critical. So not only central government and local government, but also the business sectors and the civil society should participate in the addressing climate change. In this sense, 2018 Pyeongchang Carbon Forum was quite successful and significant.
Okay, that's very interesting. Let's hear more experts who were at the forum. China and the United States are the world's two largest carbon emitters, but recently they have been at odds in their policies towards carbon dioxide emissions. While President Trump has announced to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, China is rather striving to reduce its notorious level of pollution with renewable energy. We met with climate experts from both the countries at the forum and heard what they had to say. Lauren Smith is professor at UCLA, also the author of The World in 2050. Another expert is Ching-Chen Chun, an academician at Future Science Park International Science. Take a listen.
If the United States pulls out of the Paris Agreement, my opinion and the opinion of many people is that this would be a very bad thing. It'd be bad for the world, it'd be bad for the United States, it would be bad for everyone. That said, the United States has not withdrawn from the Paris Accord yet. President Trump has declared his intention to withdraw the country, but that cannot happen until November of 2020. And furthermore, the country is not following the directives coming from the White House. At this time, there are over 3,000 cities and states and businesses and other organizations that remain fully committed to the United States pledge under the terms of the Paris Accord. And they're proceeding as if the U.S. was still in it. The United States continues to send very committed and dedicated delegates to the conventions, and a lot is happening at that you don't necessarily see at the sort of national level. That is, in fact, very encouraging. Indeed, the U.S. will come close to meeting its requirements. Not quite, but will come close in this next year. So that's very encouraging.
China has a strategy to reduce the CO2 emissions. The strategy is including in the electric generations, reduce CO2. Okay, build more and more renewable generations. In fact, according to the strategic plan, in the year of 2050, only half of the electric generation is come from fuel cell. The other half is come from wind, solar, nuclear, hydro. So number one is reduce CO2 emission in every sectors. And I am proposing to use smart energy system to neutralize the CO2, this one. Number two, promote the intelligent or smart energy system. Number three is to promote electricity for the end users, because electricity is more efficient and more environment friendly for the end users. That is the C strategy.
Ambassador, listening to Professor Smith, it seems like the United States is actually doing better than what we think, even though it is the top carbon emitter. He talked about how the Paris Agreement withdrawal is not going to happen until 2020. But what about after 2020? And if Washington really were to pull out from this agreement, what kind of consequences are we going to be facing?
Before giving an account of your question, then I'd like to say that the Paris Agreement was made possible due to the cooperation between the United States and China. Before the Paris Agreement was reached, the President Obama and President Xi Jinping got together and discussed the future of new climate regime. And they reached consensus about the new climate regime with all the parties joining the climate action and more financial contribution for the developing countries. That's why Paris Agreement was successfully done in December 2015. But 2 years later, the Trump new administration declared a withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. But it was quite fortunate that Professor Lawrence mentioned the business sectors and the state, the government, the local government, and academic circles and the city members are committed. They declared that we are still in. So I mean, we are still in the Paris agreements. So they continue to make utmost efforts for addressing climate change. So we can find the hope for America to continue their commitment to the combat the climate change. But the issue of the more financial contribution, this issue still remains. EU would like to replace the leadership of the US together with China, but it depends on how they make the financial contribution for the developing countries.
How about China? China has been, as I mentioned, striving to improve this situation right now. It's a global issue. Doctor mentioned about smart energy, right? So what is this and how is China utilizing this?
Actually, China is taking the domestic measures on climate change very, very actively and very, very positively. So the city or smart car is one of the options which the Chinese government is taking now. And the smart car or smart the city is the concept of utilizing IT and technology into the city or the cars for the best effective use of energy. So if we take the city or smart cars into the climate change, the policy, we can reduce the greenhouse gases. However, China is taking the domestic measures very actively, but in the climate change negotiations, they face challenges because, as I mentioned, President Obama and President Xi Jinping had reached the consensus to make the new climate regime. But the United States has gone, and they still request the donor base, the broadening the donor base. So China in the past would like to make more financial contributions to the world, but once the U.S. has gone, then they restructuring and recapturing their position. So it remains to be seen. And at the COP24, this is to be held in December, to be held in Poland, Katowice. So we would like to pay attention to the position of China.
That's why I think climate change is definitely a convoluted situation that all the nations actually have to tackle together. Right, let's hear more about that from a Japanese expert.
Yeah.
An increasing number of scientists are advocating for new renewable forms of energy to reduce carbon emissions. Hydrogen is one of the most prevalent resources. We connect with Hirohisa Uchida, Vice President at International Association for Hydrogen Energy, to hear more about it. Welcome, Dr. Uchida.
Thank you very much.
We remember that Japan was rattled by a powerful earthquake in 2011 that resulted in the worst nuclear power plant accident. And since then, Japan saw an overhaul in its energy policy. So why is Japan so focused on developing renewable energy, in particular hydrogen?
Yes, this is a nice question. As you pointed out, the big earthquake 2011, and we experienced a big tsunami and simultaneously big disaster, nuclear disaster. Yes, that was awful. This is really terrible. But before this experience, in the 60s, 70s, we experienced a very, very heavy pollutions in Japan, as you know well. We experienced a very rapid economic growth, but simultaneously we experienced a very, very heavy pollutions. And for example, Kawasaki, where we are now working, this area experienced very, very heavy pollution, but we overcame now. And we are very keen for clean energy or environment since that time. Yes, this is the main reason. And Japanese government will establish a hydrogen society in Japan. This is really initiative of Mr. Prime Minister Abe. Yes, this is also a reason. And because I have been long involved in hydrogen energy research and development, but the very new phase now is the industry in Japan. They are very active to make hydrogen as business, right? This is very important to realize a hydrogen energy society.
So, Doctor, do you think hydrogen can be a good alternative for thermal generation?
You cannot so compare. We need different types of energy. It depends on area, local area. Thermal power energy is also important. Many people complain, for example, coal thermal power because of CO2 emission. But CO2 emission is no problem if you have plenty of hydrogen. You can combine hydrogen and CO2. you can produce methane or new organic compounds like medicine and materials. And this is quite new trend in Japan. And I should say, in some local area, they need thermal power, and some local area, maybe solar energy or wind energy. And hydrogen can help these energy storage and also energy output control or fluctuation control. This is also a very important role of hydrogen, not only for fuel cell. Yeah.
Ambassador, the issue of renewable energy is growing, the interest is growing very much, but it's actually very expensive. It's not affordable for many countries, I hear. But how is it going with the renewables?
Yeah, so our way to the low-carbon society is inevitable and irreversible, and renewable energy is the key to get there in a faster way. And if you look at the investment on the renewable energy, we can easily figure out that more and more investment has been made to the renewable energies. So for instance, in 2015, the amount of the investment on the renewable energy is $329 billion US. And last year, in 2017, it amounts to $280 billion US. That amount exceeds the fossil fuels investment for consecutive 6 years. So nowadays, the finance, the money flows into the renewable energy. That means that the world and most industries will invest in the renewable energy and develop the technology development in relation to the renewable energy.
In Europe, for instance, I know that they use wind or they prefer hydropower rather than solar, for instance. So what is the situation in South Korea? And I also want to know about the global percentage of renewables in terms of electricity generation.
The portion of the renewable energy in the world amounts to 30% of the total energy portfolio, and 17%, among them, the 17% will be the power, I think. And so the portion of renewable energy among the portfolio will continuously increase. So I expect Korea should follow up and catch that global trend. And Korea, the new government has the plan to improve the portion of renewable energy up to 20% by 2030. So to achieve that goal, so we try to almost efforts for that.
Finally, the international community definitely links, as we mentioned earlier, this economic factor into this climate change. So why is the economy, why is it something that we cannot avoid when talking about climate change?
Yes, it is often said to reduce the greenhouse gases costs a lot and it takes a long time. But the newly adopted IPCC special report on 1.5 degrees Celsius clearly indicates that the reduction of greenhouse gases can lead to the sustainable development. The previous IPCC report has focused on the fact that the climate change has been caused by human activities. So human beings can solve the climate change. That's the hopeful message. And this special report has provided us with the hopeful message with the linkage between the greenhouse gas reduction and the sustainable development. So in the short time, the reduction of the greenhouse gases can lead to the cost and the time, but in the long run, it will be beneficial for mankind as well as for the one planet.
I understand. Thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you so much.
Clearly, problems with climate change cannot be kicked down the road for future generations to deal with. But the international community needs to work together now to tackle the issue immediately. That's all we have for this week's The Point World Affairs. Thank you for tuning in and see you again next week.